Audience, I hope you're enjoying this. I'm having a blast talking to all these politicians, and as you can see, a lot of them are my friends, and I want to treat my friends and the new people I'm meeting, equally. But I'm so grateful for people running for office, even if they don't get in. So it's a wonderful thing. And Chamber, again, thank you for doing this. And here's a man, here's a man I've never met before in my whole life, Darryl Rouson. Darryl, how you doing? You must have your mic on mute. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now try talking to me. There we go. Oh, there we go. I got you now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
All right. Darryl Rouson, State Senate District number 19. Darryl, always good to see you. So let's just ask the first question I ask everybody else. Why are you running? Why do you want to do it again? How many years have you been in office, either in the House or the Senate?
A total of 11 and a half years, both 8 years in the House and now 4 years in the Senate, soon to be. I want to continue the fight. I believed when I ran the first time that I was an agent for change, a catalyst for change. And I believe I've been effective in the fight, but the fight continues, the fight for public education funding, the fight for returning citizens to be respected in community and given jobs and skills and re-entry made easy for them.
Mm-hmm.
The fight for healthcare access and the quality of healthcare that people receive. Some things don't change. The fight for affordable housing. I think I've been effective for my district and for the state of Florida, and I want to go back. And I hope the voters will send me back.
So if I were to ask you the number one issue you think for your district in particular, and I know that we end up talking about national politics as well. We're not trying to, but what's the number one issue for them?
Well, there's so many issues. I think affordable housing is a big issue. I think transportation is an even bigger issue. And remember that I'm the only senator in Tampa Bay that has both sides of the bay. I have both downtowns, including Ybor City, Brandon, Riverview, and Apollo Beach. It takes me 1 hour sometimes to get from the southernmost portion of my district, which is where I live, to the northernmost portion of Fowler Avenue. And then it depends upon what time of day I'm traveling.
Yeah.
It even dictates my mode of travel, whether I go to Skyway Bridge to get to Brandon or whether I go to Howard Franklin or the Gandy to get to Brandon. So no one has more of an interest in regional transportation and effective transportation than I do. Substance abuse and mental health has been very important to me. I think it's very important to this district, including the fact that the pandemic has ripped the scab off the wounds and required us to pay attention, not just to our physical health, but our mental health of our first responders, mm-hmm. of the average family, the children going to school, and the things that they're struggling with during this pandemic. So there are a lot of issues.
Yeah, there are certainly. So let's talk about some of them right now that the chamber is interested in, and they were brought up. Visit Florida and Enterprise Florida. There's been some back and forth about what we should do as far as promoting the state of Florida. Some of the Republican leadership thought they were spending too much money, even threatened to take it all away. Where are you with those agencies that have to do with Visit Florida and Enterprise Florida?
Well, I didn't agree initially with the cut for Visit Florida when we cut it back in 19. But that has allowed it to right-size itself, I would argue, and become more transparent, more accountable for how it spends its funds.
Mm-hmm.
For a while there, the phrase was Visit St. Pete, Clearwater, come to the beaches. And it seemed like come to the beaches neglected downtown St. Pete. The museums, the arts, from Morian to Imagine to Great Explorations to the James Museum of Western Civilization. And we need to do better, letting people know that we not only have beaches, we have the arts and the museums, and that's very important to business and to the health of communities. So I support Visit Florida. I would just like to see its reach expand more beyond just the beach setting.
So felons' rights, voting restoration. How is that going to get straightened out? I know the courts have kind of gone back and forth about what they should be required to pay. And I think if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I think the original intent was as long as they paid all of their fees per se, that they could have their rights restored. But then it got to be, well, what are fees? Are they court fees? Are they restoration to the victims? On and on. So where do we end up with this thing?
Well, the real difficulty with this is that no one imagined how difficult it would be for one to find out exactly what they owed. And I
Hmm.
don't believe the voters intended, in spite of the language, that financial ability become a barrier to voting. Voting is one of the most pure, pristine rights that a person has as a citizen. And these, after all, are returning citizens, not just ex-offenders. They're returning human beings who deserve an opportunity to have a second chance at life. And
Hmm.
those who prove their worthiness and their fitness by having done their time, paid their debt, ought to be allowed the right to vote, to participate in the governing structure of the communities within which they live. Now, the difficulty that we are encountering, and I think the legislature is going to have to address this again, and not just the Democrats, not just the Black caucus, but the entirety of the legislature will have to address what we're going to do to help people figure out what the heck they owe. Get that taken care of, whether it's a lien or payment, and welcome them into the voting process.
All right, let's talk about another issue. USF St. Pete and the consolidation that took place. People are concerned that the people that are going to get shortchanged may be the businesses in St. Petersburg and maybe the students that want to get an education in St. Petersburg and not necessarily over in Tampa. So what would you do to try to smooth that over? And is there anything that can be done to smooth it over?
Well, we may have to return back to that which we had before the change and the consolidation took place. I wish to say that I think I had hoped that I would be wrong. I fought with Ben Diamond, I fought with Rick Baker to try to uh, defeat consolidation because we feared that it would be hurtful to a labor workforce, the students coming out skilled that businesses need to operate their businesses. More than that, we figured that there would be a lack of diversity. And it's been on a precipitous decline in terms of minorities being able to be admitted to University of South Florida. All that glitters in terms of premier university status is not gold and is not helpful to the community. So we may have to do something to return to that which we had beforehand.
We another issue that came up as a result of COVID and is also as a result of some of the demonstrating that take place in the last several months in the United States has to do with policing and behavioral health. Pinellas County, through Sheriff Bob Gualtieri, has now established 6 mental health teams where they have an officer combined with a mental health worker to go into those kind of domestic situations, which end up being very volatile for everyone. Do you support that kind of program, and should there be more of those like that?
I support that kind of program, and there should be more like that. You don't always need a gun to a drug overdose. You don't always need a gun to a domestic dispute that deals, or you don't always need a gun for somebody who's suffering with a mental crisis.
Hmm.
I do support that. We need more of that. It's ironic that today a friend of mine sent me a newspaper clipping from 2004 when someone had spray painted the NAACP headquarters, "No more Popo, Popo keep out. This is our territory. No police containment." And I went and bought a spray paint can and I sprayed over the number 50 and said, if you think that the police department is singularly our problem, then join the police department. Change the culture from the inside out. And I know it's not very popular to say in certain communities these days, but this is a perfect time for African Americans, Hispanics to join police departments, really change a culture from the inside out. If something happens and someone breaks into my house, I'm not calling the local radical organization or the protesters. I'm calling police. And I want them to be professional and not heavy-handed in doing their job.
Hmm. So let's talk about something else that I know you're going to be dealing with is the budget concerns, because the state had to pick up a lot of COVID costs. So this goes back to this original question that I've asked all of the candidates, and I'm interested in your take on this. So a lot of confusion to begin with. Uh, especially in terms of, well, what's the federal government required to do versus what's the state required to do? Should the state be required to have all this PPP and everything else that's necessary to handle a pandemic, or should it be the federal government that is responsible for that? Where do you fit in that?
They both have responsibility. The state must look out for its citizens, its residents, and be adequately prepared through the Department of Emergency Management. And I think the governor is in Clearwater just today with Jared Moskowitz and the Department of Emergency Management.
Hmm.
But the state must be prepared to take care of its own citizens. Yet there are things that the federal government can do that can help the state. And if we shouldn't be a donor state, we shouldn't be paying more in tax dollars than we get back in supplies and things that our citizens need. So I think there's both uh, opportunity for to
And
the.
let me ask you another issue that's going to be big, and I've just found out some new information on this, is the insurance crisis in Florida. Next year, not this year, next year, the full impact of the new maps will go into effect, which means a lot of people that are living in areas that are near the beaches and stuff, they're going to see their insurance rates double, could be triple. What is the legislature going to do in terms of insurance to make sure that the rates just don't basically people put out of their homes?
We're going to monitor it. This crisis has taught us a number of things, including the fact that healthcare is very important. Housing is precarious and in a crisis situation. And we're going to monitor it and watch it. I served as vice chair of the Banking and Insurance Committee for the last 2 years in the Florida Senate. And that issue has come up many times, affordability of insurance, where the
Mhm.
premiums are going to rise. And we're going to be monitoring that and looking at that.
Are there areas in the state of Florida where the legislature should just basically say, no, you can't build in that area unless you can prove that your density will be taken care of, and then that you will also are required to pay into a hurricane fund for people that have built in places that maybe they shouldn't have, but they did get approval to?
I think so. And I think that the coastal high hazard uh, ordinance that City of St. Pete is considering
Yeah.
is well positioned to position developers and builders to be concerned about climate change. Climate change is very important to Pinellas, being a peninsula.
And let's talk about, lastly, the budget. Where do you think the cuts are going to have to come if we're going to have a balanced budget as we go forward? Because we know the COVID response has required a lot of additional spending that obviously we didn't plan for.
Well, I would like to say across the board, every area needs to be looked at, but then there are some areas that it should be more sacrosanct than others. I'm advocating for small business relief. They're being hurt during this pandemic. It's been estimated that I think well over 100,000 small businesses will never reopen.
Yeah.
That's significant and it's critical. And so I'm going to be advocating that small business assistance and relief programs be beefed up so that we can continue to support these institutions that do most of the hiring.
All right. Darryl Rouson, Senate District number 19, running again for your office. Thank you so much for your time, Darryl, and keep up the good work in Tallahassee. And good luck in the election.
Thank you very much.